About 500 years before Judas betrayed Jesus, the Old Testament gives details about it that are almost impossible to ignore. In the book of Zechariah, it mentions 30 pieces of silver. Zechariah says that the money is thrown into the house of the Lord, and he connects it to a potter. Fast forward centuries to the Gospel of Matthew, Judas gets 30 pieces of silver for betraying Jesus. Judas feels so guilty after giving Jesus over that he throws the money into the temple. Then the priests use that money to buy the potter's field. That is terrifyingly specific, and most people have no idea that this is even in the Old Testament. The passage comes from Zechariah 11, verses 12 through 13. Then I said to them, "If it seems right to you, give me my wages. But if not, keep them." So they weighed my wages, 30 pieces of silver. "Throw it to the potter," the Lord said to me. "This magnificent price I was valued by them." So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw it into the house of the Lord, to the potter. Now, Zechariah is one of the prophetic books in the Old Testament. This was written centuries before the life of Jesus. And scholars debate the exact date of the later chapters of Zechariah, but it is fair to say that this prophecy was written roughly 500 years before Jesus was betrayed. And in Zechariah chapter 11, there is a strange moment where the prophet is paid 30 pieces of silver. And the Bible doesn't say gold, it doesn't say copper, it doesn't say shekels, or just money. It's silver. And it's not just some random amount, it's 30 pieces. Then the Lord tells Zechariah to throw it to the potter in the house of the Lord. Before we even get to Judas, before we even get to the New Testament, before we get to the crucifixion, we have 4 details in the book of Zechariah for the betrayal of Jesus. There are 30 pieces, it is silver, the money is thrown into the house of the Lord, and it's connected to a potter. Also, help me reach 1,000 subscribers. Hit that subscribe button. It really helps a lot. Thank you so much. Now watch what happens in the New Testament. In Matthew 26, Judas goes to the chief priests. And this is really important because Judas doesn't betray Jesus to just some random group of people. He goes to the religious leaders. He goes to the chief priests. These men are connected to the temple. These men are connected to the house of God. And Judas asks them one of the darkest questions in all of the Bible. "What are you willing to give me if I hand him over to you?" And Matthew records the exact amount. Matthew 24, 14 through 16 says, "Then one of the 12, the man called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, 'What are you willing to give me if I hand him over to you?' So they weighed out 30 pieces of silver for him. And from that time, he started looking for a good opportunity to betray him." 30 pieces of silver. That is the first connection. Just as Zechariah mentions 30 pieces of silver, Judas hands over Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. And that matters too because the amount itself is humiliating. In Exodus 21:32, it says, "If an ox gored a slave, the compensation should be 30 pieces of silver." So Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the Messiah, the King of Kings, was given over for a price associated with a slave. Exodus 21:32. "If the ox gores a male or female slave, he must give 30 shekels of silver to the slave's master, and the ox must be stoned." And I don't believe that that is random. I believe that that is part of the humiliation. Jesus is not just betrayed. Jesus is undervalued. He is priced like a slave. The one who created the universe is sold for 30 pieces of silver. But the prophecy does not stop there. Zechariah doesn't only mention the amount, and he doesn't only mention that it is silver. He mentions that the money is thrown into the house of the Lord. So what happened after Judas betrayed Jesus? Well, Judas realized what he had done. Jesus had been condemned, and Judas is filled with an unbearable guilt that I can't even imagine. He goes back to the chief priests and the elders. He says, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." But they basically say, "That's your problem." So Judas takes the silver and throws it back into the temple. Matthew 27, verses 3 through 5. "Then Judas, his betrayer, seeing that Jesus had been condemned, was full of remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders. 'I have sinned by betraying innocent blood,' he said. 'What is that to us?' they said. 'See to it yourself.' So he threw the silver into the temple and departed. Then he went and hanged himself." Don't miss that. It says in Zechariah that the 30 pieces were thrown into the house of the Lord. And in Matthew, Judas throws the 30 pieces into the temple. He does not keep the betrayal money. He does not go to spend it, and it was not lost somewhere in Jerusalem. He goes back and he throws it into the house of the Lord. He throws it into the temple. That is the second major connection. But now the chief priests have a problem. They have blood money sitting right at their feet. Even though they were willing to pay Judas to betray Jesus, now all of a sudden they're acting all religious and righteous about what to do with the money. They say they can't put it back into the treasury because it's blood money. And I think that is extremely ironic. They are okay using that money to put an innocent man to death, but now they are not okay with putting that money back into the treasury. So what do they do with it? Well, they use it to buy a field. And not just any field, they buy the potter's field. That's right. In Matthew chapter 27, verses 6 through 10, it says, "The chief priests took the silver and said, 'It's not permitted to put it into the temple treasury since it is blood money.' They conferred together and bought the potter's field with it as a burial place for foreigners. Therefore that field has been called Field of Blood to this day. Then what was spoken through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. They took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him whose price was set by the Israelites, and they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord directed me." Now Matthew clearly wants you to see the connection. He is not hiding it. He is saying, look, this happened to fulfill what was said by the prophet. Now Matthew mentions Jeremiah, even though the clearest wording of the 30 pieces and the potter's field is found in Zechariah 11, Jeremiah also has strong imagery about buying a field and pottery. And in ancient Jewish ways of referencing scripture, they would sometimes refer to larger portions of scripture just by using the name of the prophet. So Matthew is combining prophetic themes from Jeremiah and Zechariah. But most of the direct wording comes from Zechariah 11. I just wanted to clear that up. And either way, the details are still there. And again, I think that is the craziest part. Zechariah mentions the 30 pieces of silver. He says it is thrown into the house of the Lord. And he connects it to a potter. Roughly 500 years later, Judas betrays Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. And he throws it into the house of the Lord, being the temple. And the chief priests use it to buy a potter's field. That is what makes this prophecy so crazy. It's not just one detail. It is a chain of details, and it all shows up in the betrayal of Jesus. This is history, and what we can say honestly is that if this is a coincidence, then it is an extremely specific and unlikely one. This is not just a vague prophecy that the Messiah would be betrayed. This is a prophecy giving the details how he would be betrayed, how much he would be betrayed for, what the currency was, how it would happen. The details are incredible. And this is why it matters so much. The betrayal of Jesus was not an accident. It was God's divine plan from the foundations of the world. The cross was not God reacting to a situation that got out of control. The cross was the plan in God's divine wisdom the entire time. And that's why we have prophecy, because this is God revealing to you and to me that this stuff is true. How else can he prove it to you? So that is what God does throughout all of these prophecies, and it is incredible. It is evidence for you. People say, well, why doesn't God just reveal himself? One, that wouldn't take any faith to believe in him. You need to have a true faith, a true belief for this to all work. And two, I would argue that he does, through the scriptures, through his creation, through these prophecies being fulfilled. But Jesus was not surprised by Judas. God was not surprised by the chief priests. The betrayal, the silver, the temple, the potter's field, it was all woven into the story before it ever even happened. And that is what makes the Bible so incredible. God makes it so clear. There are so many cross references. There are so many prophecies, and there are so many details that get fulfilled. And at some point, that becomes very hard to ignore. And in my opinion, when you really start studying this, I think it takes more faith to call all of this random than it does to believe that God was showing us the truth all along. The Old Testament had already given the prophetic pattern. That's what makes this prophecy so intense. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. The Bible calls the price of the betrayal roughly 500 years before it happened. And if you look even deeper, you see the shame of the betrayal. And if you look even deeper than that, you see the location where the money was returned. And if you keep looking deeper than that, you'll see what the money was used for. This is one of the most overlooked prophetic fingerprints in all of the Bible. And the question is this: how specific does God have to be before we stop calling it random? Jesus is not just a religious figure. Jesus is not just a good teacher. Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus Christ is Lord. And if that's true, then the correct response is not just finding that interesting. The right response is to follow him, get in a Bible-believing church, and be baptized. If you found this interesting, click this video right here. I think you'll find this one interesting as well. God bless you guys.